Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jeff Brace from Vintage Computer Federation. Just tell a little bit about me. I'm the Vice President of the Vintage Computer Federation, also the showrunner for VCF East, which takes place in Wall Township, New Jersey. I've been a member, and I also do event manager. I do other events besides the VCF East local events that we have there. We have swap meets, we have repair workshops. I've been a member of that group since 2008. I just showed up one day, and then they got involved with that. I'll tell a little bit more about that later. A little background about me: I graduated from Drexel University in 1996. I had a bachelor's in computer information systems. I was a database programmer for about 5 years before becoming a Taekwondo instructor. I did that for about 13 years, and then I decided I wanted to be an elementary school teacher. So I'm working towards that. I got my master's about 4 years ago in elementary education, and currently doing substitute teaching, trying to find a permanent position. My first computer was a Commodore 64. I had gotten it in 1986. My first computer I'd ever used was in 8th grade, and it was a Apple IIe, and we did the logo turtle graphics thing. And I was like, well, I want that computer, because that was the only computer that I saw. But then it was like, $1,300 plus, so it was very expensive. So I was telling my brother's friend that he said, oh, well, I'm going to sell this computer, a Commodore 64 with a monitor, disk drive, printer, and a whole bunch of pirated games. I was like, $150? Sure, that's great. So my dad actually said, I'll help you buy it. So I bought it, and the first year I just played around with games for the first year. And then I was like, well, what else can I do? So I opened up the user guide, and I was like, oh, wow. And then I found out about a user group, local user group. And then my mom knows some, she cleans house for this guy, and he has this magazines and everything, and so I borrowed the magazines, and so I got, involved with that. But that's about me. VCF. So right now, VCF, their mission, I'll read the mission statement: to preserve computing history through education, outreach, conservation, and restoration. We strive to accomplish this through family-friendly, hands-on activities on our museum, at our regional and global events, and by fostering and nurturing the expansion of online and in-person communities. So it took actually a long time for us to actually nail that down. But we're a nonprofit, so we're not in for the money, and we're trying to further, vintage computing hobby. So I'll start out about the Vintage Computer Festival. Maybe it's not focused. What?
It's a 64.
Click.
Yeah, at least it's where you turn it off and turn it back on.
All right, so this is the 25th anniversary of the Vintage Computer Festival. It's
Windows.
All right, I'll go this way. This 25th anniversary started in 1997. A guy named Salam Abraham, decided to post a CC talk, and I guess it was still around back then. And he didn't know what to expect. He posted the CC talk and to some other, I think Apple II group, to Usenet, CompSys, Apple II, and some other. There were not a lot of vintage computer discussion lists, because this was kind of early, because we had. It's kind of like. It was kind of early. It's like we had Commodore went out of business in 1994. At what point did people consider things vintage? This is like 1997. People started to think well, maybe we should start to save some of these computers. Maybe we should, because now things went in a whole different direction. You got iMacs coming out. You have all these DOS clones coming out. So he thought, like, let me just post this, see what people think, because like some of these people were involved, in the early, the 60s, the early 70s, the mid 70s. You had different homebrew computers. So surprisingly, there was a lot of interest by different people. So people who had personal attachments to computers that they used at home, at work, and so it was pretty good. It was in California, Alameda County Fairgrounds. So it was successful. It started out with different talks. There are actually some famous people that were there. I think, was it Felsenstein might have been at that one. So there was a lot of, interesting and famous people in vintage computing at that original show. But, he just tried it and got a lot of interest and people started to come. So then they did it again the next year, 98. This time they went to Santa Clara Convention Center. They did it again in 1999. And then started to branch out. All right? Is this going to work? Yeah, started to branch out. I'll leave that alone. Europa. There was actually one in Europa in 2000. And then VCF East started in 2001. That one was in Massachusetts. And eventually there was Midwest, I believe. Midwest. When was Midwest? I'll look that up later. So there's branch out to other ones. Had the Midwest. We had Southwest, believe it or not, there was one or two of them in Texas area. And Southeast, that was in Georgia and Europa. And there may be some other ones, but it started to branch out because people had interest, so I'm going to let different people do that. VCF East did it again in Massachusetts in 2004, but then at some point, they went to, at 2006, they went to InfoAge. And how did that happen? So the Vintage Computer Federation started in 2016. What was before that? In 2005, a group of people posted to, I don't know which group it posted to originally, but they posted like some interest because there was a Trenton Computer Festival, and that's really has a lot of history. It goes back, to the mid '70s. Trenton Computer Festival. They would have whole parking lots filled with people selling things and parking on the side of the roads where they shouldn't be. But it was like huge. So people decided to meet at the Trenton Computer Festival in 2005, and then at the dinner, some people were like. The guy who sort of organized these people, someone's like, hey, here's $20, open up a bank account. He's like, what am I going to do, open up a bank account? We're just a bunch of guys just hanging out. And, that was the beginning. He opened up a bank account. We started an organization called MARCH, which stands for Mid-Atlantic Retro Computing Hobbyists. So Evan Koblitz, they decided he would become president of the group, and that organization was formed. That one was a for-profit organization. I don't think they originally intended to be that way, but it was a for-profit. And somehow they found InfoAge, which is a science and history museum in Wall, New Jersey. It's formerly Camp Evans. They had a lot of military research there in the 40s. You have a satellite dish, radio dish there. So they said, we're starting a museum there because the Army left Camp Evans, and now they say, we got to preserve this. This is historical. A lot of things happen here. So they all right, we started getting people like Evans, you want to start a museum here. So they started a museum, and it was only like a 10 by 10 room. It was very tiny. But that was a start. And then somehow people started donating, because the way it is. People are like, hey, you want this old computer? You want this old computer? We got not just micros, but mainframe computers, big mini computers, and so we say, all right, they started renovating different places. So then they got another 5 rooms, 5 10 by 10 rooms. So we expanded our museums, had different themes. We had the mini and mainframe room. We had the consumer micro room, which is the Apple II, Commodore 64, and then they had the business computers, and then had a homebrew like, you know, the IMSI and Altair. So we had that for a couple of years, and then we got another space that was bigger. It was like basically putting all those 5 rooms plus maybe a little bit more, so it's maybe 900 square feet. And it was a, you know, well renovated place, so it was actually pretty nice there. Back to the VCFE. So the Evans had started that organization, and they said, let's do he says, all right, I'll do VCF East, but it has to be in Wall Township, because they had it in Boston originally. And he said, okay. So then it started out small. It was just like one room there, and still like sort of renovating that place, and then it grew from there. I started, I think, at VCF East in 2008. So they started in Wall in 2006. So I guess I was VCF 5.0, they called it. So that's when I showed up, because like for years I would, like, you know, when I went to Drexel, you know, barely use my Commodore anymore. They use Macintoshes there. So every once, you know, summertime I'd bring it out and here, you know, play around with it, and like, is there any other, you know, people out still interested in this stuff? And so sometimes I'd see Midwest or West, you know, VCF. Now, the original wasn't called West; it was called just Computer Festival. And then even World of Commodore. I was like, well, I can never get any time off. I couldn't travel anywhere, so I found VCF East, and I just show up. I'm waiting in line. I go in there, and then they find out that I live 10 minutes away, and they say, do you want to help volunteer? So that's how I got volunteered. And like, you know, everyone would call me up like on a Sunday, hey, can you help me out, move around these heavy things? I'm not very good with sort of moving things around in the warehouse, you know, because that was like where everyone started donating, and it got out of control. So there was a lot of like organizing of that. So that's how I got started. And eventually, I got, you know, more involved until I was on the March board, and then VCF. I became, you know, on the national board of the VCF. In 2009, the Vintage Computer Festival in California stopped. The showrunner couldn't do it anymore for health problems. But then it was rebooted again. Once Vintage Computer Federation was created in June 2016, we rebooted that and called it VCF West. Eric Klein started that. He had a forum, Vintage Computer Forum, which he handed over to us at the Federation, and we still have that running. In fact, we used to be using vBulletin, but that started to go downhill, that software, and now it's using Zenforo, and it's having a lot of success. And so, anyway, they rebooted it in California, and we've been having it there every year. We did briefly do one in Pacific Northwest. Yeah, we've done 2 of them. We were going to do our 3rd one, but then COVID happened, and we had to cancel it. And then the Living Computer Museum shut down. That's where we held it. Unfortunately, they shut down, and they're out of business. There's a lot of great artifacts there, so the showrunner decided he didn't want to do it anymore. So that's always, you know, biggest problem is where you're going to have it. So we did have that briefly. So VCF East. So the showrunner for VCF East, Evan, he stopped. He resigned in 2019. Actually, right before COVID. And so then I suddenly became the showrunner. I was sort of the co-showrunner for a few years, helping him out and getting him organized. There was always like different people have different skills. He was good about getting speakers and running the show, but I was good about keeping things organized. So I suddenly became the showrunner, and we're like, you know, oh my God. And then like COVID started coming. It was like, all right, now what do? We got to reschedule it to October. So then we're like, all right, it's still a problem in October. So we did a virtual show. We had never done that before, so it was a big learning experience for like a lot of people. So we did virtual, and it was pretty successful. You know, we got a lot of different people there and a lot of different diversity. So then we were going to do it again and try, because our usual time of the year that we do it is in April. It used to be, originally I think it was September, and then we moved it to May, but May is always a problem with different holidays and things, so we moved it to April. But then we had to postpone it again. COVID again a problem, so we moved it to October, and then again to April after that. So, and we kept it as a hybrid. I know it's, you know, different people will like different ways. Like people like the in-person aspect, but at the same time people don't want to travel and they want to see it streaming online. So it's always like, you know, hard to please everybody with that. But we're going to continue doing hybrid, but we're going to try to encourage people to be in person, because you want to really meet the people in person. You don't want to just stream online. That's why you're there, for the show. So our museum, so future plans for our museum, we have, so right now I mentioned we had like a 900 square feet, and we have opportunity to get 6,000 square feet. So that's pretty huge, but it needs to be renovated, because at InfoH, they have a lot of, they call H buildings. They're different interconnected buildings, but they all had to be renovated one at a time. So basically people would store stuff in there, so basically we have to clear out the junk and then renovate it, which is going to take a lot of money. But it's a great opportunity to have more artifacts shown and less of them in the warehouse, because it's not climate controlled. We do our best, and we're working on, that's actually one thing we're working on, is moving our where our warehouse is full of stuff to another section and trying to have some climate control, because that's like the biggest thing, because you know, people keep donating and donating, but where you're going to store it and how you're going to preserve it. So we've done the best that we can to slim down, like you sell surplus things and recycle like things that have already been archived online. So it's a constant challenge, because there's always people like, hey, you want this, you want this, I have a bunch of old books from Windows 95, and it's like, or sometimes we'll get some good things, you know. And so we will, you know, this constant battle to manage what we have and to you know, preserve what is actually useful. So, all right, I think I'm up to there. All right, what does that say? So I sort of mentioned that already. So yeah, the museum. So the version that we have now, I call it version 3.0. One addition that we did to it was an 80s bedroom. So it's not really a bedroom, but it's sort of like a section with a wall and a desk, and it has a Commodore 64 and a printer and everything. So we have like a print shop exhibit. So people coming to the museum and visiting, they can, you know, say, you know, kids want to print out a print shop, and they think it's great because then you can take it home. But it has different like posters there, like Miami Vice and Back to the Future. It has, like, some of my toys. I have like a TIE X-Wing fighter from Star Wars. That's the original, because I actually saw Star Wars in a movie theater. Rubik's Cube, you know, Monty Python. So all these different things, like as if it was 80s bedroom. So it was kind of a fun way to spice up the museum. So I called that version 3.1. And then an office exhibit. So like what kind of computers would you use in an office? And I have a, you know, office phone with multiple lines on it and things like that. We sort of changed it around recently, so we still have the Commodore 64 there, and we, you know, moved the office thing to another spot. And the goal for the museum now is we just actually established a mission statement for the museum itself, not for the Federation, and then a vision. we want to try to get as many of those machines working as possible, so that we want to be hands-on. Just like the Living Computer Museum was hands-on, it's great. Whereas like the Computer History Museum, I don't know if you guys know about the Computer History Museum, you can't touch much of anything, just like the Smithsonian, right? It's all behind stuff, you can't touch it. We want to be more hands-on. So maybe I'm thinking more like a mixture, like some stuff has to be behind there because it's like valuable and fragile, and whereas other stuff is hands-on. So we're constantly working on getting different machines working. We have a UNIVAC 1219B. It's a later model UNIVAC from 1965 that actually does work. Those were typically used on naval ships for ballistics control. It's really amazing. I didn't know, obviously we always tell them that early computers were for calculators, they're big calculators. Because you didn't have something in your pocket, you had this huge machine that had either vacuum tubes or transistors. So that one actually does work. There was another one called George Philbrick machine. It's like an analog machine. That's a someday project that hopefully we can someday get working. The next big project we have is we just finished a fundraiser for the IBM 1130. So then there's a guy called Carl Klonch who lives in Florida who's an expert in repairing these things. So we have the money to get that repaired. He's finishing up repairing one for System Source, which is a museum down in Baltimore area. And once that's finished, they're gonna go down there, bring theirs down there, our 1130 down there, and pick up theirs. And so we'll get that repaired because that would be pretty cool to have like a mini computer working. We have a working PDP-8. A working HP 1000. So we're trying to get as many of these machines as working as possible, and that's sort of our goal, to have lots of hands-on. And we went back to sort of like a chronological tour of the museum, so the oldest machines to the newest machines, but we're trying to get more into like education. So kids nowadays, they go in there like have no idea what these computers are. So it's always interesting. First of all, the kids would say, "Where's the mouse? Where's the mouse?" And then like there's no mouse. And then some of them have mice on them. And then kids don't even know about keyboards or mice, so they start on the Macintosh. They start touching the screen. They think it's a touch screen. They start ping, ping, ping. I was like, no, it's not a touch screen. So and we sort of like blocked off sort of the interest in the museum, so they sort of are encouraged to go through the flow, because oftentimes it's understandable to go straight for like the Macintosh, because that's the most recognizable sort of machine that they could try to understand. And then they'll see the 3.5-inch floppy disk, and they'll say, "Oh, did you 3D print the save icon?" No. The save icon was from this disk, right? Other improvements that we made. So we've experimented with different things, like having touchscreens for each section to tell about the museums and videos. And then those cheap Android tablets, it didn't work. And then well, now what do we do? So now we have actual signs. We started out simple, just like a little no card sign that says on one side shows the technical stuff, and the other one sort of the story. The Commodore 64 was the most successful home computer. Between 12 and 17 million were sold. It was very good because of the sound and graphics. It was low cost. So that's sort of like this little signs. And then backdrops, because the backdrops that we had were like white and they were fading, and we replaced them with black cloths. And then skirts, so black skirts underneath, so you couldn't see the junk underneath. So it's shown some improvement. We keep improving on it. We'll keep working on that. So I sort of mentioned this already. Chronological organization, because it started getting mixed up. People would just take one out and replace it with something, and it's getting very hard to be docents. And so the warehouse. So we started out with some donations that we stored in the basement of the InfoH main building. And then they gave us a warehouse space, and that really got a lot of space, like maybe 3,000 square feet that we had. And there's Grabe. I don't know if you're familiar with Dmitry Grabe, but you can look that up. He had a lot of very rare artifacts. But InfoH owns them, but we sort of caretake them for them. But a lot of like microchips and other artifacts like that are very rare. Dmitry Grabe. So then we moved the warehouse to another location. There were some problems with the rain. They fixed that, but they're still sort of leaking. So that's one of the reasons why we're moving out of that one, because the roof. And that's actually happening pretty soon. I mentioned this. Oh, so yeah, VCFE started as a one-day show, and then it grew and went to 2 days, and then we went to 3 days. And the idea was on Friday we do VCF East University, which is more technical talks. Like I think the last two talks with the OS, that's more technical. That's for people that are more technical. Not your wife or daughter, maybe they're not interested, or someone else that might not be interested in different people. So Friday's more like technical classes, where Saturday and Sunday's more general public. We have exhibits, talks. And it has grown. We originally just did like one keynote per day, and now I do like here, like a bunch of talks in the one day. People can pick and choose what they want to do. So it's like a proper conference where you can just watch what you want. And consignment. Oh my God, consignment. Buying and selling. We actually we make a lot of money from that, but also the people selling it make a lot of money from that. It's just. And it doesn't stop. We started doing swap meets 2 or 3 years ago, and it started out with like 20 people, and it's like 60 people consistently. So we do that like once a year. But consignment, people love to buy and sell. Like it's amazing. It's good for everybody. People want to get rid of their stuff, and people want to buy that stuff, and it's rare finds too. People had found like AT&T 3B2 in good condition or something like that. So, I had gotten one from VCF West. I'd gotten one of the Commodore PCs, PC 40 or something like that. But so, that does well, consignments. So now it's a 3-day show. We're gonna keep doing it like that. So this is, I started out volunteering, worked my way up, worked in the warehouse, I was docent for the museum. Now I've since handed that over to someone else. They're like the manager for the museum. So that helps offload some of me. So I took over as a benchmark, so that sort of did that already. And then co-showrunner, showrunner, so yeah. And then I mentioned about March. Dissolving, and then which Computer Federation creating. Founding board members were me, Evan Koblenz, Corey Cohen, later Eric Klein, I mentioned Bill Degnan. He was doing the talk on starting your own museum. Evan resigns as executive director, and then he becomes a fundraiser. So he had to do that because then he wanted to do fundraising for an organization. He couldn't be on the board. Michael Brutman, he's involved in some PC Junior stuff. He was actually the showrunner for VCF Pacific Northwest until he stopped that. And currently there's 5 board members: me, Eric Klein, Corey Cohen, who's our treasurer, Dag Spicer, he works at Computer History Museum, and Bob Roswell, he owns System Source Museum. He has actually a pretty nice museum there. It was a part museum and part office space, but then COVID happened. Now people, they don't want to come back to the office. They just work from home now. So he's expanding his museum even more, taking down cubicle walls and adding more. And in fact, we're lending him a second set of UNIVAC machines from him. So he has a nice museum there too. And then we did another one in April. We tried an indoor one in February, but that was kind of hard. We had to spread it out between 3 different buildings. It was really cold, but it was successful. And then we had another one in October, and we have 2 more planned. And all right, that's ready. So next, so yeah, challenges to running a show. And our next VCF East is 2023, April. The theme is computers and education. I'm hoping to get some like YouTube streamers there, popular ones, and I have Bill Hurd sort of moderate it, and then possible speakers: Liza Loop, Quinn Dunkey, Rebecca Mercury, Margaret Morabito. She did it last year, but she's going to have more of an emphasis. She was an editor of Run Magazine, and she did the Learning Center on Q-Link, and Cynthia Solomon, she made a logo. All right, so I guess that time's up.
What's the difference between museum and, I know you get VCF as an event.
Yes.
When's the museum open?
So the museum, I mentioned InfoAge. InfoAge is the big umbrella organization. They have multiple museums. They have a radio museum. They have so that museum we're part of that. So it's Saturday, Sunday, and Wednesday, 12 to 5 p.m.
Is that on the website?
Yeah, that's on their website.
InfoAge's website.
InfoAge's website, yes, and the VCF website too. So yeah, that was sometimes it's confusing. There's Vintage Computer Federation, and there's Vintage Computer Festival. So we run the Vintage Computer Federation runs VCF East and VCF West. Midwest is independent. They still have the name festival, as well as Southeast, and then some others in Europe. There was like one in Europe, in Switzerland just recently, and we're hoping we have some people organizing to try to reboot VCF Southwest in Texas. Hoping to have it in Dallas because there's a lot of interest in that area. So hoping that they'll get it together and reboot that one. Any questions, anybody? All right, well, thank you. Thank you. And you. And thank you, Brian, for inviting me. He's not in the room, but I appreciate it. It's a great show here.
Glad you can make it.
Yeah, thank you.
It's such a good